The salty breeze of Santa Monica Pier carried laughter, music, and the scent of street food, but not all sounds that day were joyful. A cruel voice cut through the air, sharp and heartless. "Move, cripple." The words were followed by shoves and kicks aimed at a young disabled girl who had done nothing more than try to enjoy the ocean view. People watched in shock, some turning away, others frozen in silence, until the ground began to rumble. The distant growl of engines grew louder, and in moments, a sea of leather-clad bikers rolled in, surrounding the scene. What happened next would not only silence the bullies, but also restore faith in the power of unexpected protectors. The Santa Monica Pier was alive with color and sound that afternoon. Tourists strolled with cones of ice cream dripping onto their fingers, children tugged at their parents' hands toward the arcade, and street performers filled the air with laughter and music. The sun sat golden above the horizon, stretching its light across the rippling water, and for a moment the entire pier felt like it was wrapped in a postcard-perfect image of joy. But just beyond the smiles and laughter, in the middle of that carefree crowd, a different story was unfolding, one that would etch itself into the memory of everyone who witnessed it. Among the crowd was a young girl in a wheelchair. Her legs were thin, her body fragile, but her eyes carried a quiet strength that seemed older than her years. She was maybe 12, dressed in a simple hoodie with the sleeves tugged over her hands, her hair pulled back neatly as though her mother had combed it carefully that morning. She wasn't there to draw attention to herself. She was simply there to enjoy the ocean, to hear the gulls cry overhead, to breathe in the salty wind like everyone else. She wheeled herself forward with practiced, determined motions, the rubber grips of her wheels turning beneath her palms as she stopped to look over the rail at the crashing waves. But cruelty, as it often does, arrived uninvited. A group of teenagers, maybe 16 or 17, swaggered across the pier. Loud voices, laughter that wasn't warm but mocking, the kind that sliced instead of shared. They noticed her, because bullies always notice the ones they think won't fight back. One boy, taller than the rest, leaned forward with a grin that curled cruelly at the edges. He spat the words so loud they cut through the music and chatter around them. "Move, cripple." The word echoed, sharp and ugly, leaving a silence in its wake that made even strangers stiffen. People turned their heads, some frowned, some gasped quietly, but none stepped forward. The girl's hands froze on the wheels of her chair. She didn't look at them immediately. Instead, she stared harder at the ocean, as if the waves might swallow the sting of that word. But the bullies weren't done. The same boy stepped closer, his friends egging him on with laughter. "Did you hear me? I said move. This pier isn't made for you. You're blocking the way." The girl swallowed, her throat tight. She wanted to disappear, wanted the wooden planks beneath her chair to open and swallow her whole. She wasn't blocking anyone. There was space, plenty of space. But logic didn't matter to people like them. They weren't looking for reason, they were looking for power. He nudged her wheel with his shoe, just enough to jolt her chair. She gripped the armrests to keep steady. "What's the matter? Can't move unless someone pushes you." His voice carried, loud enough for everyone around to hear. His friends howled with laughter. Each word dug into her like claws. She had heard it all before, of course. The whispers at school, the pitying stares, the laughter she pretended not to notice when she rolled down the hallway. But somehow, out here, in the middle of this bright, bustling pier, it felt worse. Here, in front of strangers, her shame and her struggle were laid bare. She bit her lip so hard she could taste blood. The crowd shifted. Some people looked away, as if by pretending not to notice they could erase the cruelty. Others looked directly at the scene but did nothing, their bodies stiff with unease. One woman clutched her husband's arm and muttered, "That poor girl," but her feet never moved closer. A man in sunglasses shook his head but kept walking, as though he had a dinner reservation more important than standing up for a child. The bullies, sensing the silence of the crowd, grew bolder. One of the girls in the group leaned forward and sneered. "Maybe she wants attention. Sitting there all helpless so people will feel sorry for her." She mimicked the motion of rolling a wheelchair with exaggerated, mocking spins of her hands. The others roared with laughter. The girl's face burned. Her eyes stung, but she refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not in front of them. If she cried, they would win. So she held her breath and forced her eyes back to the horizon, back to the endless line of water that seemed so much bigger than this moment, even if her chest felt like it was collapsing under the weight of humiliation. Then came the shove. It wasn't hard enough to knock her over, but it was cruel enough to shake her frame, to send the front wheels of her chair rolling unevenly against the wood. "Oops," the boy said mockingly. "Guess she's as weak as she looks." Her hands shot to the wheels, gripping them tight to stop the chair from moving farther. The laughter was deafening now. It filled the air, drowning out the music of the buskers, the cries of the gulls, even the crash of the waves. It was the kind of laughter that told her she was different, unwanted, less than human in their eyes. And the worst part wasn't their voices, it was the silence of everyone else. Why didn't anyone say something? Why didn't anyone stop them? She could feel the heat of dozens of eyes on her, watching, pitying, but none of them stepping forward. She wanted to scream at them, to beg them to see her as more than a spectacle. She wanted them to tell the bullies to stop. But all she could do was sit there, trapped in a chair she couldn't leave, her dignity slowly being stripped away with every word. A little boy tugged at his mother's hand nearby. "Mom, why are they being mean to her?" he whispered loudly, innocence cutting through the ugliness like a blade. His mother hushed him quickly, embarrassed, and pulled him away. The girl in the chair caught that moment, and it broke her even more. Even the youngest could see the cruelty for what it was, yet the adults, the ones with the power to intervene, chose silence. The bullies laughed louder, emboldened by the crowd's cowardice. One boy took out his phone and pointed it at her. "Let's put this on TikTok," he snickered. "Wheelchair warrior." His thumb hovered over the record button. The girl's stomach twisted into knots. Not only would they humiliate her here, in person, but they would also broadcast it to strangers around the world. She shook her head slightly, her lips trembling, but words refused to come out. The leader of the group crouched down to her level, his face inches from hers. His grin was wicked, but his eyes were empty. "Say something," he taunted. "Go on. Cry for us. Or are you too scared?" Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. She refused to give him what he wanted. She clenched her jaw, stared at the ocean, and told herself silently, "Don't cry. Don't cry. Don't cry." But inside, the storm raged. She felt invisible and exposed all at once. She felt small, crushed under the weight of their voices. She wanted her mom to appear from the crowd and pull her away. She wanted someone, anyone, to stand between her and them. But the pier stretched wide and endless around her, and still no one moved. The seconds dragged like hours. The girl could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears, faster and faster. She thought about the times in the hospital, when doctors told her she might never walk again. She thought about the countless hours of therapy, the ache in her arms as she learned to navigate the world on wheels, the moments she told herself she was strong enough to handle anything. But now, with these kids towering over her and the crowd watching in silence, she felt that strength slipping away. Her eyes darted for an escape. But where could she go? If she wheeled forward, they would block her path. If she tried to turn, they would push her back. If she called for help, would anyone even answer? She was trapped, not by her chair, but by the cruelty of those around her and the indifference of the people who should have been her shield. The boy with the phone laughed. "This is gold. Look at her face." He zoomed in, capturing her fear like it was entertainment. His friends cackled. #crippled life, one of them joked. The words sliced deeper than any shove ever could. She had spent years fighting to be seen as more than her disability, to prove to herself and others that she was just as worthy, just as human. And yet here she was, reduced to a joke, a spectacle, because cruelty was easier than kindness for them. She gripped the wheels of her chair until her knuckles turned white. She wanted to scream at them to stop, to tell them she wasn't what they said she was, to tell them she mattered. But her throat locked, her voice stolen by fear. The laughter swelled again, and she felt herself drowning in it. Somewhere deep inside, she begged silently for the world to intervene, for something, anything, to break this moment before it swallowed her whole. And though she couldn't yet know it, though the sound hadn't yet reached her ears, help was already rumbling in the distance, carried on the roar of engines that would soon change everything. The laughter of the bullies still hung in the air, sharp and echoing like broken glass, but beneath it there was a new sound. At first, it was faint, almost drowned out by the cries of gulls and the shuffle of footsteps across the wooden boards of the pier. It was low and steady, like the distant growl of a storm. The girl in the wheelchair didn't notice it at first. She was too focused on holding herself together, too lost in the echo of cruel words and the sting of humiliation. The bullies didn't notice either. They were too absorbed in their own voices, too drunk on the power they thought they held over her. But the crowd began to stir, a few heads turning toward the horizon where the pier met the road. The sound grew louder, thicker, rolling like thunder across the sky. Engines. Dozens of them. The unmistakable rumble of motorcycles carried across the pier, vibrating through the wooden planks, a sound so commanding it couldn't be ignored. People turned their heads. Tourists stopped mid-stride. Children tugged on their parents' arms and pointed. The bullies faltered for the first time, their laughter breaking for a moment as they exchanged quick glances. The girl noticed it then. The silence, the way people shifted their attention away from her tormentors toward something else. She lifted her head just enough to see the approaching figures. From the end of the pier, they came. One by one, then in waves, a sea of bikers rolled in, the sun glinting off chrome and steel, leather jackets catching the light, patches stitched across their backs like badges of loyalty. Their engines roared in unison, not chaotic but unified, a sound that seemed to declare that they belonged to something bigger, something unbreakable. There weren't just a handful, there were dozens, maybe more. The pier trembled slightly under the weight of their presence. The crowd parted instinctively. Where moments ago people had been standing idle, frozen in hesitation, now they stepped aside as if commanded by some unseen force. Parents pulled their children close, not in fear but in awe, because there was something about the way this group moved together that demanded respect. Strangers lifted their phones to record, sensing they were about to witness something unforgettable. The bullies shifted uncomfortably, their laughter dying into silence. They tried to mask it with smirks, but the smirks didn't quite reach their eyes. For the first time, the balance of power shifted. The leader, the boy who had shoved the girl's wheelchair, straightened up and sneered, but the edge of his confidence had dulled. He muttered something to his friends, but his voice was barely audible over the thunder of engines. The bikers slowed as they reached the center of the pier, surrounding the space with deliberate, synchronized movements. They didn't rush or stumble. They didn't need to. Their very presence was enough to change the air. It was thick now, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. The bullies were no longer the center of attention. The girl was no longer the target of the crowd's gaze. Every eye was now fixed on the sea of bikers who had arrived not by chance but with a purpose that none could yet define. The engines cut off, one after another, until the pier was heavy with silence. The kind of silence that carries weight, pressing down on everyone within it. Only the ocean spoke now, waves crashing against the shore as though applauding the arrival of something righteous. The leader of the bullies swallowed hard, shifting his stance as one of the bikers, a tall man with a long beard streaked with gray, swung his leg off his bike and stepped forward. His boots thudded against the wooden planks. He didn't speak right away. He didn't have to. His presence alone was a language that even the cruelest bully could understand. He looked at the girl first, his eyes softening as he took in her tear-stained cheeks, her small hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair like anchors keeping her steady in a storm. Then he turned his gaze to the bullies, and the softness vanished. His eyes were steel now, unflinching, sharp enough to cut through any facade of bravado. "What did you just say to her?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Every word was heavy, deliberate, like a stone dropped into still water. The crowd leaned in, breathless, waiting. The leader of the bullies forced a smirk, but it faltered under the man's stare. "Nothing. Just messing around." His voice cracked slightly. "Messing around," the biker repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. He stepped closer, and the other bikers followed suit, closing in like a tide. "That didn't sound like messing around to me. That sounded like cruelty. That sounded like cowardice." The boy's friends shuffled back a little, their earlier laughter nowhere to be found. The boy himself stood frozen, his smirk collapsing entirely. The girl in the wheelchair watched, her heart pounding, unable to believe what was happening. For the first time that day, she wasn't alone. For the first time, someone had stepped into the storm on her behalf. Another biker, a woman with tattoos running down her arms like rivers of ink, crossed her arms and spoke up. "You think it's funny to pick on someone who can't fight back? Try saying that word again while looking us in the eye." Her voice was fierce, edged with fire, and the boy couldn't meet her gaze. The silence stretched. The crowd, emboldened by the biker's presence, began to murmur in agreement. "Yeah, leave her alone," someone called. "Disgusting," another whispered. The bystanders who had been silent a moment ago now found their voices, shielded by the wall of leather and steel that stood between the girl and her tormentors. The leader of the bullies stammered, "We were just joking, all right. Relax." The gray-bearded biker's eyes narrowed. "Jokes don't leave bruises on hearts. Jokes don't make a child look like she wants to disappear. That wasn't a joke. That was abuse. And I don't tolerate abusers." The weight of his words struck like thunder. The boy's face paled. His friends tugged at his sleeve, whispering that they should go, that it wasn't worth it. But the boy stood frozen, trapped between pride and fear. He wanted to save face, but the sheer force of the biker's presence crushed every ounce of his bravado. One of the bikers, younger than the others but broad-shouldered and intense, leaned forward. "You think you're strong because you outnumber her. Because she can't fight back. Real strength is protecting people, not tearing them down. You wouldn't last a second against any of us." The boy's lips parted, but no words came out. He looked small now, smaller than the girl he had mocked. The laughter was gone, replaced by silence, shame creeping across his face as the crowd's eyes bore into him. The girl in the wheelchair felt her throat tighten again, but this time not from humiliation. It was from something unfamiliar: relief, gratitude, the overwhelming realization that someone had finally taken her side. She felt tears sting her eyes again, but these weren't tears of shame. These were tears she couldn't hold back, even if she wanted to. The gray-bearded biker knelt down beside her, lowering himself so he was eye level. His voice softened. "You okay, sweetheart?" She nodded, though her chin trembled. I'm fine." He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "No, you're not, but you will be, because you're stronger than they'll ever be." The girl's lips quivered as she tried to smile back. His words sank into her like warmth after a long, cold night. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a burden, not as a target, but as someone worth defending. The bikers turned back to the bullies, and the air thickened again. The woman with tattoos spoke firmly. "You owe her an apology. Now." The boy hesitated, his pride clawing desperately for an escape, but the weight of dozens of stares, bikers, crowd, even his own friends, pushed him forward. He swallowed hard and muttered, "Sorry." "Louder," the gray-bearded biker demanded. The boy's voice cracked. "I'm sorry." The girl looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She didn't believe the apology, not fully, but it didn't matter. The power had shifted. He wasn't in control anymore. He wasn't the one with the audience. She was. And around her stood a shield of people who had shown her that she was worth protecting. The bikers didn't smile. They didn't pat him on the back for apologizing. They simply stared, their silence heavy enough to make the boy squirm. Finally, the gray-bearded man spoke. "Now walk away, and remember this moment every time you think about opening your mouth to hurt someone again." The boy nodded quickly and turned, his friends scattering behind him like leaves caught in the wind. Their swagger was gone. Their laughter was gone. All that remained was the echo of engines and the image of a girl who had stood taller in her wheelchair than they ever could with two good legs. The crowd erupted then. Not in cheers, not in applause, but in something deeper. Respect. Relief. A collective exhale of the breath they had all been holding. Phones recorded, but this time they weren't capturing cruelty. They were capturing justice. They were capturing the moment when silence was broken, when a wall of strangers rose to defend someone who couldn't defend herself. The girl looked around, overwhelmed. She wanted to thank them, to tell them how much it meant, but the words tangled in her throat. The gray-bearded biker seemed to understand. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder and said softly, "You don't have to say a word. We heard you loud and clear." The engines roared to life again, one by one, filling the air with that same thunderous symphony that had heralded their arrival. The bikers mounted their motorcycles, their presence lingering like the afterglow of a storm. The girl watched as they rode off, the pier trembling under their departure, leaving behind not fear, but hope. And though the bullies had walked away, though the crowd would eventually disperse, the moment would stay etched forever, not just in the girl's heart, but in the hearts of everyone who witnessed the day when cruelty was silenced by the roar of compassion. Thanks for watching video. Please like, subscribe.